Hello and welcome to the match preview, Cheltenham Town against Newport County this Saturday at Whaddon Road. I'm Ed. Nice to have you listening, Exiles, and I'm joined by friend of the pod, Dan, who came on earlier in the season. Dan is involved not only in the Robins Report podcast, but also in the Excellent Talk of the County podcast about all things football in Gloucestershire. Have I got that right, Dan?
That's correct, mate. Yeah.
Very good, very good. So let's get straight into it then. Newport County's trip to Whaddon Road on Saturday. There's a few things to pick out. So when we last spoke, it was before that game back on the 18th of October, and I was just looking now to remind myself about that game. And that, of course, was the one where we went into it. Cheltenham were the only team in the whole league worse than Newport County. And by the end of the day, we'd switched around and we were in bottom place. It took us another month after that to sack Dave Hughes. But you were right at the sort of early stage of your Steve Cotterill bounce. And as most of us said at the time, and I think we said in the preview, he will pull you out of this mess. And he's done so. And I think I'm right in saying the last time you lost a game at Whaddon Road was back in January when you played Grimsby Town, which I was actually there for. So it's been a while since you've lost a home game. So you must be coming into this with a bit of confidence. But tell us about the last few months and how it's been for you.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. Like you said, when I come on the pod last time, we was in dire straits. We'd had a really poor summer of recruitment, and I put that down to the fact that the club was going through a sale. With a new owner. No disrespect, but we were signing players like Leanne Gull, who'd suffered 2 relegations in the last 2 seasons, and he was on for a third with Cheltenham. Steve Cotterill come in roughly around the time we played you with a massive bounce. He beat Fleetwood in the first game. We'd come down to your place, and probably up until Walsall last weekend, probably our best away performance of the season. And then we got to January. In between then and January, we signed players like Ben Stevenson, Haki Bedelican, Tompkinson, players who probably wasn't in Cheltenham's wage bracket before the takeover. So the takeover happened at the end of August, literally just before the transfer window shut. So we didn't have a lot of time to do anything. But what Steve was able to do was go in and pick some really decent free transfers up, i.e. Haki Bedelica and Ben Stevenson.
Stevenson's an interesting one, by the way, because when we spoke on our podcast towards the end of the transfer window, or just after the transfer window, and said who are the free agents who you would look to bring in, I had to look down the list and looked on Wikipedia and said, look, I'm no coach, I'm no tactician, but looking at that list, the sort of player that we're missing is Ben Stevenson, and he's come in for you and done a really good job, not just from what I've heard, but from the few bits that I've seen of you play. He looks like a really smart acquisition.
Yeah, he is, because obviously, as you guys will know, we also signed Isaac Hutchinson, but we managed to get him in before the window shut, and that was literally, I think Mike Garlick, the sale of the club went through on the Friday. It was a transfer window kind of on the Monday, and Mike Garlick came in, and that was one of the first signings we made. He's now scored 20 goals this season, but as brilliant as he's been, and he's been absolutely outstanding. Can't take away from what Ben Stevenson's done, because Ben Stevenson does the ugly side of the game. He plays a simple 5-yard pass, and breaks up play, and I always liken players like him to like a Michael Carrick. When he used to play, nobody used to rave about him, but you didn't realise how good he was until he isn't playing.
Well, the go-to example for that for Newport County fans, you will laugh at this, but the one who we always put in that bracket, we always describe him as the onion in the curry. You notice if he's not in the recipe, it was Scott Bennett, and for years he was that player for us that he would only be a 7 out of 10 every week, but he'd allow the players around him to be an 8 and a 9 and a 10 out of 10. But I know Cheltenham fans have a different view on Scott Bennett. But
I didn't. I thought some of the stick he got was unfair. Don't get me wrong. I think probably this season was a season too far for him for Cheltenham. But the trouble is that things got a bit nasty with Michael Flynn, and even though it wasn't Michael Flynn's fault, it was what was going on in the boardroom with Gary Johnson and stuff like that. But Scott made a couple of mistakes. He was out injured. Steve Cottrell gave him a chance against Buxton in the FA Cup, and he miscontrolled the ball, and Buxton ran through and scored. So you can quite imagine the stick he got. Personally, I don't abuse players. Don't get me wrong, I have my opinions on him, but I never abuse players. But some of the abuse he got from Cheltenham fans was uncalled for, and he's obviously at Western now, and I wish him nothing but good luck.
He's at Western and also spending a lot of time in a Newport County tracksuit doing stuff with the I'm not sure whether it's with the doing his like academy badges or something, or doing some stuff with the community. Because so he's kind of got this weird two roles, and neither of them seems to be with Cheltenham at the moment. But we'll see what the future holds for him. So you've obviously found enough form under Steve Cottrell. You've cobbled together results. You've pulled yourselves clear of trouble. Not by miles, but by enough that you're comfortable by this point. And you're now on this lovely little run. I mean, you played Walsall perhaps at the best possible time, but hammered them at the weekend. And then you played Gillingham last night. And I mean, I cannot believe how low Gillingham are in the table. When they came to us at the start of the season, I thought, well, that's the side that's going to be going for promotion. And basically, since then, they've been at best inconsistent and at worst awful. And you've got to win there. So the recent form is superb.
It was a funny game last week. Well, we've actually lost only 2 in 13, but you can flip it on the other side and go, I think we won like 5 in 15, 16. But that's the thing. Steve Cottrell's made Cheltenham hard to beat, and that's all we needed to do was become hard to beat. And we picked the points up around the teams around us, which has kept us away from it. And we picked up the odd result. We drew Cambridge on bank holiday on the Monday. Before that, we went to Notts County. First half was literally all over them. It was 2-2 at half time. They got the third goal, and I said, when you realise Ben Stevenson's not playing, when they got the third goal, they was just running through our midfield, where probably 2 of those goals doesn't happen if Ben Stevenson's playing. But anyway, and then we picked up the odd points against the top sides. But the last night's game was a strange one, because we went 1-0. First 15 minutes we were pretty good. Gillingham scored, and Gillingham could have gone on to get 2 or 3. They had like a 10-minute spell where they absolutely battered us. We got back in the game just before halftime. Isaac Hutchinson, they say death taxes, and Isaac Hutchinson scoring. And then Mo Fowl, another player we would never be at Cheltenham Town without the investment. I don't know whether you've seen it, but what an absolute screamer to win it in the 95th minute.
I haven't. Our attention last night was all on the game Barrow against Oldham, which was also a hell of a game. Ended 3-2 to Barrow, and I think a lot of us are still traumatised by the last sort of 10 minutes of that game. But let's not go into that probably for now.
No, I honestly, I'm not saying it because I'm on your pod, but I genuinely want you guys to stay up. If Barrow and Harrogate go down for clubs like us, it's good, because we haven't got to travel halfway at the country to go and play them. So coming to Newport, I'd rather take 900 to Newport than 125 to Barrow. So Saturday's going to be one of those games where obviously I'll never ever want my team to lose. And he like some of our fans have been singing "We're on the beach," and even Steve Cottrell made a comment in his press conference and said, "Why I'm at this club, we'll never be on the beach." And that's the mentality we've had. That's why we pulled out of this trouble, because he doesn't settle for anything less than you go out there and give 100%.
Yeah, and I think we're looking at it. On the one hand, you think, well, you're up against a side who don't have anything to play for, but you've got that very strong record at the moment. I think the only thing that gives me a little bit of cause for optimism is you've played on the Tuesday night, and we will have had a full week to recover, and there may be a little bit of temptation as well to rotate and rest players, I guess, amongst Steve Cottrell. But yeah, I think it's hard to see us coming there and getting more than the point. But I think from a county point of view, we're looking at it and thinking, well, we don't want to be going to Barrow on the last day of the season needing to get something. So really, ideally, we'd want to try and get a win out of away at Cheltenham or home to Oldham. Obviously, ideally both. But some fans have been saying, "Oh, well, Cheltenham, that's the one. But I'm not convinced. I think it's going to be a really tough slog, and we are going to have to be at our absolute best if we're going to get even a point.
But it's usually, to be fair, you see it as the season goes on and the results will come in. It's probably Cheltenham you'll slip up with and then go and beat Oldham. That's how we when we was looking at results going, well, if we go there and we get 3 points there and then it's a 3-hit against them, but the 3-hit we end up winning, the one we was expecting to win we'd go and lose. So but no, good news for you guys is Ben Stevenson's also out. He's out for the rest of the season now. He could play, but Steve Cottrell said after last night's game when he was asked about him, he said he probably could play again this season. He goes, but the thing is, he goes, after him having 2 weeks off when the season ends, and this goes to show how serious Cots is, because they get to have 4 weeks off, and then we give him a summer program, and he goes, what we don't want to do is risk him, that niggling injury he's got, persist over the summer and it puts him behind, and then before you know it you're in August and he's 2-3 weeks behind everybody else, kind of thing. So he won't be playing, so that's good news for you guys.
Fingers crossed for that. The other thing I was going to ask you, Dan, is you'll have seen lots of teams this season come to Whaddon Road and seen play elsewhere. Who for your money are the 2 worst sides in this division?
Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury, we beat Shrewsbury home and away. We beat them 3-1 at home and 2-0 away. There was nothing. And you talk about Gillingham. You look at some of the players Shrewsbury have got, and you wonder why they're struggling. But especially with their defence, but they've been one of the worst teams. And Crawley were awful away. But that was one of Michael Flynn's. I think it was the penultimate game before Flynn got the sack. We lost 2-0. They were dreadful, but we was worse. And we beat them 3-0 at home over the Christmas period. I think maybe New Year's, about the 4th of January, I think it was actually. So yeah, do you know what? I actually think Harrogate and Barrow are not that bad, especially Harrogate. I thought Harrogate are actually, both times I've seen them, we drew both times of them, are actually a decent football inside. They try and play football. Barrow at home, I think we drew 1-1 at home and we beat them 2-1 away. But yeah, weirdly, the 2 sides I think are the worst 2 sides I've seen are Shrewsbury and Crawley, and they're both just outside. But I know we're talking about the Cheltenham and Newport, but what's your thoughts on Tranmere? I think Tranmere's running is awful, isn't it?
They're the ones who I think are going to get sucked into it. I mean, a few weeks ago I said that the teams I can see going down are Tranmere, and whoever loses the Harrogate versus County game, which we ended up winning. So at the moment, my prediction is Harrogate and Tranmere, but County are far from safe, which is why for us Saturday is a really important one. So yeah, if you bump into Steve Cottrell between now and Saturday, do put in a word for us and say that you would all like to have a nice close by trip for next season, and if he wants to stick the reserves out and a few of the under-9s, then that would be ideal. But
I think that's probably the only way you'd get into Steve Cottrell's head, because if you went to Steve, I'd let Newport stay up. He would like, no, but if you turn around and went, hey Steve, just imagine you don't have to go to Barrow next season, but you could just go down and go to Newport. He'd be, yeah, good thinking.
Well, Dan, it's been a real pleasure again. I do hope that we will get to have this conversation again next season. But thank you very much for your time. And apart from Saturday, all the best for what remains of the season.
Yeah, same to you guys. Good luck after Saturday.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.